This video focuses on another really important group that impacts politics in this country, and that's interest groups. And we kind of talked about them, off and on throughout the course of the entire year. This video focuses on like what are interest groups, and then what are the different types of interest groups. So first things first, an interest group is really like any group that sort of forms to influence like what the government's doing. It's sort of like on the outside, like influencing the inside. Right? They're not part of the government, right? But they're trying to influence what the government actually does. Right? There's some sort of like group that believes in an issue or believes in a cause, and they try to influence the government to support like their interest or cause. There are several different types of interest groups. They're not all the same. You have like political interest groups, and these are the ones that probably get the most attention. These types of interest groups generally focus on like a single political issue. The NRA, right? Maybe the most influential interest group, obviously supports like gun ownership rights, or the AARP, which is the American Association of Retired People, another super influential interest group that advocates on behalf of like older citizens in this country. PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They typically focus on animal related issues. If you saw like Tiger King on Netflix, you saw like PETA and sort of like their fight against the sort of people that have these animals or exploit them or don't treat them properly and things like that. So these are the ones I think you're probably most familiar with. There are also economic interest groups, and these typically are interest groups that focus on bettering working conditions for like one particular like occupation or job. So like examples of these would be like the American Medical Association that are going to look out for like doctors and nurses across the country, right? Or the NEA, which is the National Education Association, which is sort of like the national teacher union, like one that I belong to, that is going to look out for the interests of like teachers, right, across like the country. So they're very specifically focused on sort of like helping a particular occupation. You also have like public interest groups that tend to focus on like their work will benefit like all citizens. You don't necessarily have to be a member. So like for example, a lot of the environmental interest groups like Greenpeace are an example of public interest group, meaning like if they're successful, like you don't have to actually be a part of the group to like reap the benefits of their work. Like a cleaner environment would just benefit you whether you're a contributing member to Greenpeace or not. These types of groups tend to have what we refer to as the free rider problem. Whereas like, for me to be a member of the NEA, like I have to like pay, like I have to pay dues to belong. To be a member of the NRA, you have to be like a member, right? But like with public interest groups, like they sometimes have a hard time getting paying members because again, like if they're successful, like everybody's going to benefit whether you're a member or not. So like people are kind of like just benefiting without necessarily having to pay. It's like you're jumping on a bus with not having to pay, like you're riding for free, like so to speak. And then you have like what we call government units. Believe it or not, state and local governments actually form interest groups. Like the city of Philadelphia can also be an interest group, right? Like, I guess last year the city of Philadelphia spent over $500,000 trying to persuade like the Pennsylvania state legislature to give the city a larger chunk of the state's budget to fund its programs. Like they'll spend $500,000 now to persuade state legislative officials if that means that they'll get a lot more back in the form of like a budget. So even like state and like local officials can form like government units and put pressure on other elements of the government. So these are just some of the different types of interest groups that exist.